The great Prince Charming, who boasts his manners in front of the people, has been exposed by one of his former maids. And now the whole world knows him as a rotten, privileged son of a crown. Watch this video till the end to know what and why Prince Andrew's former maid revealed his true nature. Now it all makes sense. He did not become a terrible being. He was always an evil person. Charlotte Briggs was a person who had a dream of serving the royal family, and she used to think that by giving a person love, they would always turn out good. But this time, she was wrong. What Charlotte didn't realize was that sometimes circumstances are so toxic that no matter how lovingly you nurture a snake egg, it will only spit out a snake. That's what happened in Prince Andrew's case. She had been only 21 when she entered Prince Andrew's world. A world that promised the glamour of palace halls and the prestige of royal service, but instead left her describing her job as the one nobody wanted. The reason was simple. Behind the polished walls of Buckingham Palace lived a man who was not the charming Duke of York the public once imagined, but a figure his own staff openly called arrogant, rude, and unhinged. In one of her interviews with the Daily Mail, she wasted no time. She told everything she thought about Andrew. "I don't give a toss what Prince Andrew feels. He is a horrible, nasty man." It was not the language of someone looking to soften her words. It was the most raw testimony of someone who had endured years of demeaning treatment. And as her story spread, the world finally got an unfiltered glimpse into how Andrew really behaved when the cameras weren't around. Her earliest memories of the Duke were of him as lazy, entitled, and easily enraged. In her account, Andrew often barked orders for tasks he could have done himself. Curtains became one of his obsessions. Heavy floor-to-ceiling drapes that could easily be drawn by his own hand were instead the responsibility of Briggs. Once she left the faintest gap between them, the mistake, if it could even be called one, unleashed a tantrum. Andrew stormed from his office, shouting down the corridor, his voice echoing with profanity. "Can't you bloody do anything right?" He screamed as he reduced the young maid to tears. It was a glimpse into the power system that the staff endured daily. In Andrew's household, mistakes weren't tolerated, no matter how trivial. Every act carried the weight of punishment. Briggs recalled moving through rooms with the constant fear of being noticed. "I did everything I could to avoid him," she admitted. His presence was unpredictable. His temper was worse. But it wasn't only his temper that unnerved her. It was his strange demands, one so obsessive and humiliating they bordered on the absurd. The most infamous revolved around his collection of stuffed animals. To outsiders, it seemed like a cute little quirk, a grown man clinging to childhood. To those tasked with maintaining it, it was a nightmare. The Duke of York kept 72 teddy bears alongside a stuffed hippo and Black Panther and insisted they were arranged with military precision. No one touched them without guidance. Laminated instruction sheets detailed the placement of each toy, down to which should stand at the back, which belonged at the front, and where his two favorite bears should sit, always flanking his bed like sentinels. Briggs described spending an entire day being trained on this ritual alone. A misstep could trigger one of Andrew's infamous tantrums. His bedroom itself resembled a shrine to his own fragility. The royal crest-embroidered pillows had to be perfectly centered after the mattress was turned. His pajamas were to be laid out with exact symmetry. The stuffed animals, after being displayed, were to be removed before he went to sleep, then returned at dawn. Staff, Briggs included, often wondered what sort of man demanded this treatment and what it meant about him. The press wasn't slow on this. It later capitalized on these stories, painting a portrait of a grown prince trapped in arrested development, dependent on young maids to soothe his temper and protect the sanctity of his teddy bears. For Briggs, however, it was no laughing matter. It was like walking on eggshells every day, she said. The image of a royal who cried like a little over curtains and bears clashed violently with the charm he attempted in public. Even worse were his interactions with other servants. Briggs described him as someone who treated palace staff as trash, with no gratitude or courtesy compared to Charles, Edward, and even Prince Philip, who she remembered as respectful and gentlemanly. Andrew was in a class of cruelty all his own. It's not like she was pulling these stories out of her hair. Other former staff revealed similar stuff. One ex-maid recalled being forced to rush across the room to close curtains that Andrew himself was standing directly next to, just to remind her of her place. Another described his coldness and condescension in the simplest exchanges. And yet, what made these revelations sting even more was how unnecessary they were. Andrew wasn't burdened by the responsibilities of his siblings. He wasn't a future king. His role was ceremonial at best, indulgent at worst. But still he demanded worship from those beneath him. The truth Charlotte Briggs revealed was not just about a man with a temper or childish quirks. It was about a pattern, a man who relished humiliating others, who saw service not as assistance but as submission, who created an environment so toxic that even working in the palace became unbearable. And this was only the beginning. Actually, no. This was not the beginning. There was something about Andrew that even Charlotte knew, and it all started at a very young age. From the very beginning, Andrew's character stood apart from his siblings, and not in a flattering way. Where Charles was quiet and bookish, where Anne was stubborn but capable, Andrew seemed to embody something far less innocent. Even as a toddler, palace staff and royal watchers noted a habit of cruelty that ran through his play. He didn't just crave attention, he demanded it. And he often found it through taunting and tormenting those who couldn't fight back. One of his earliest amusements was baiting the Queen's stone-faced guards. At an age when most children might shrink from their intimidating presence, Andrew strutted past them, mocking their rigid posture, pulling faces to break their composure. When they didn't react, he grew angrier, escalating his antics to force them into acknowledging him. This wasn't harmless mischief. It was a boy who believed no rules applied to him, not even the silent discipline of the men protecting his family. But the real cruelty was shown when he was not against people. Animals to bore the brunt of his spoiled temper. Accounts from the time describe him kicking at the family dogs, laughing when they yelped, striking at horses' legs with sticks for his own amusement. The behavior so horrified the royal grooms that one day they took matters into their own hands. Seizing the young prince, they shoved him headfirst into a pile of horse shit and covered him with fresh dung. Burying him in the filth he had so enjoyed inflicting on others, it was a grotesque punishment, but one they clearly felt he had earned, and that wasn't the only time staff broke royal protocol to correct him. On another occasion, his relentless taunting of a palace footman provoked the man to retaliate. He ended up punching the boy hard enough to leave him with a black eye. When the footman offered his resignation, expecting immediate dismissal, the Queen refused to accept it. Even she seemed to recognize that Andrew's behavior had crossed so far into cruelty that discipline was justified, even if it came from one of her own servants. His nastiness wasn't confined to staff or animals. With his younger brother, Edward, Andrew turned every interaction into a contest. He bullied him openly, snatching cakes away, shoving him and leaving him with bruises. It wasn't brotherly horseplay. It was domination. To those who saw it, it revealed a boy intoxicated by the thrill of superiority, always needing to establish that he was in control. At school, his reputation followed him like a stench. At prep, and later at Gordontown, classmates dubbed him Baby Grumpling for his tantrums, and the Snigger for his mean-spirited laughter at others' expense. He wasn't the charming royal some hoped for. He was the brat, spoiled, smug, and perpetually mocking. Even as he grew older, his mentality didn't mature. It simply became harsher. Stories circulated of him yanking at the zippers and dresses of female staff at palace events, shoving their faces into food with a jeering command to smell the partate. It was the behavior of a bully, not a prince. On camping trips, he was said to sabotage others' shelters, tearing down fly sheets and tossing them into rivers, leaving his companions soaked and miserable. To Andrew, it was just another prank. To those who suffered it, it was humiliation. Staff who worked under him summed it up best. He didn't speak with the polite formality expected of a royal child. Instead, he threw objects to the floor and barked orders laced with profanity, demanding pick that up, for servants who were accustomed to discipline. To restraint, to dignity, the boy's language was shocking. They saw in him not a mischievous child, but a spoiled tyrant in miniature. By the time he was old enough to wear a uniform, Andrew's reputation was already built inside palace walls. He wasn't the beautiful heir like Charles, nor the hard-edged but capable Anne. He was the one staff dreaded dealing with. The child they called intolerable. A boy whose idea of fun was cruelty, whose idea of respect was domination, and whose arrogance seemed to grow stronger the older he became. How they wished he would grow out of it. But sadly, things kept going even worse. By the late 1990s, Andrew's public mask was already slipping. The scandals weren't just about rumors of temper anymore. It was about money, women, and an arrogance that had become impossible to disguise. While his brother Charles was pretending to remake himself after Diana's death, Andrew was sinking deeper into behaviors that would stain him forever. One of the earliest cracks came with his financial ties. His lavish spending, fueled by the perks of his royal position, collided with his reckless business ventures. Reports surfaced of him cutting deals with questionable figures, often men under investigation abroad. The royals quietly buried most of these stories, but whispers of cash for access schemes followed him everywhere. What began as small favors for friends quickly spiraled into allegations that Andrew was monetizing his royal title, arranging meetings for businessmen in exchange for large sums. The palace denied it, but the paper trail kept surfacing. Alongside the money came his obsession with younger women. After divorcing Sarah Ferguson, Andrew seemed unable to shake off the image of a middle-aged man chasing women half his age. He flaunted relationships with models and socialites, many barely out of their teens and thousands of them. His driver once said that he used to see almost 10 women go in and out of his place in Bangkok. It wasn't just embarrassing for the family. It was disturbing. Journalists began openly calling him Randy Andy, a nickname that stuck for decades, reducing the Queen's son to a tabloid punchline. Even within the palace, it's whispered about his inability to separate himself from inappropriate company. Then came his infamous friendship with Jeffrey Epstein. Long before Epstein's arrest, Andrew was spotted at his New York mansions, his Caribbean estate, and his private jet. Photos of Andrew walking with Epstein after his first prison sentence raised questions that he has never been able to answer. The problem wasn't just the association, it was his brazenness. While other powerful men distanced themselves, Andrew doubled down, calling Epstein a loyal friend and insisting he had no regrets about their relationship. That single decision would ruin him later. But Epstein wasn't the only shadow hanging over him. Behind palace walls, staff were compiling their own private list of grievances. Maids complained of being treated like servants in a medieval court rather than employees in a modern household. One maid described how Andrew forced her to run up 7 flights of stairs just to close curtains inches away from where he was standing. She said the abuse was relentless, verbal, demeaning, and designed to break them. Another recalled him screaming over a minor mistake with his teddy bears, warning that no one was allowed to touch them but him. His treatment of the Queen's staff was so notorious that some began calling him the Prince of Darkness in private. Andrew didn't just bark orders, he degraded people. Gardeners reported him berating them for leaves being out of place. Drivers said he would scream over a car being 5 minutes late. One former equerry admitted that working for Andrew was like being a human punching bag. These accounts, buried for years, trickled into the press one by one, each painting a darker picture than the last. The public saw glimpses of this entitlement during his overseas trips. As Britain's trade envoy, he was supposed to represent the country with dignity. Instead, reports described him berating foreign staff, treating waiters with contempt, and demanding accommodations that rivaled dictators rather than diplomats. At one event in the Middle East, he allegedly reduced a hotel worker to tears by screaming over the temperature of his suite. Diplomats traveling with him admitted that cleaning up Andrew's outbursts became part of the job. His personal life only fueled disgust. After Sarah Ferguson's own scandals, like being caught accepting money in exchange for introductions to Andrew, the two seemed locked in a toxic symbiotic relationship. They lived together, separated, but not divorced, clinging to the perks of royal life while ignoring the humiliation they brought to the monarchy. Critics accused them of using their titles as shields, while indulging in behavior that would have destroyed ordinary reputations. By the early 2000s, Andrew was spiraling. He wasn't respected like Charles, admired like Anne, or even tolerated like Edward. He was ridiculed. His nickname shifted from Randy, Andy, to Air Miles. Andy, after it was revealed how frequently he abused taxpayer money on private jets and helicopters for trivial journeys. Once again, the image was damning. A man clinging to luxury, blind to how out of touch he looked in a Britain struggling with economic inequality. Every year, more palace insiders broke their silence. They described a man obsessed with status, desperate to be seen with celebrities, and utterly lacking self-awareness. Even at family gatherings, his arrogance made him an outsider. Princess Diana once reportedly remarked that Andrew was the least intelligent of the Queen's sons, but also the most entitled. For once, even her critics seemed to agree. The warning signs were all there. Entitlement, temper, toxic friendships, reckless spending. But no one stopped him. Protected by his mother's unwavering love, Andrew drifted further into the shadows. Insulated from consequences until Epstein's world collapsed and dragged Andrew with it. That was when the world saw the prince not as a spoiled royal, but as something far darker. The scandal that came next would not only destroy Andrew's reputation, but also permanently fracture his place in the royal family. The turning point came in 2010. Jeffrey Epstein had just been released from prison for soliciting from a minor. Most men of power ran from him. Andrew did the opposite. He was photographed strolling through Central Park with Epstein, laughing as if the scandal didn't exist. That single image detonated like a bomb. For the first time, the public saw the Queen's son walking side by side with a convicted sex offender. Then came Virginia. In 2015, her name exploded into the public record. She accused Epstein of trafficking her as a teenager, and she alleged that Andrew was one of the men she was forced to have with. She described meeting him 3 times. Each time she said it was arranged by Epstein's partner, Ghislaine Maxwell. The most damning piece was a photograph. Andrew with his arm around a 17-year-old way, Ghislaine smiling in the background. Andrew's response was denial. He claimed he never met her. He even suggested the photograph was fake, but experts examined it and found no signs of tampering. The denial only made him look more desperate. The palace panicked. For years, they tried to shield him, issuing vague statements and relying on the Queen's authority to silence criticism. But the evidence kept growing. Flight logs showed Andrew traveling with Epstein. Witnesses recalled seeing them together in London, New York, and the Caribbean. Every detail cut deeper into the royal facade. By 2019, pressure had reached a breaking point. Andrew agreed to sit for a BBC interview, intending to clear his name. What followed was one of the most catastrophic interviews in royal history. It began with excuses so absurd. They turned him into a global joke. He claimed that on the night Jeffrey said she met him at a London nightclub, he'd actually been at a Pizza Express in Woking with his daughter. He repeated the detail like it was a concrete alibi, unaware of how ridiculous it sounded. The internet exploded with memes, turning a serious allegation into a circus. Then came the sweating remark. Rue had said Andrew was sweating heavily as he danced with her. Andrew countered that he had a medical condition that prevented him from sweating at the time. The excuse was so bizarre, so unbelievable that it instantly destroyed his credibility. It wasn't just denial anymore. It was delusion. But the worst moment was his tone. Instead of expressing sympathy for Epstein's victims, Andrew focused on himself. He said staying with Epstein after his release was convenient. He called it a mistake, but quickly added that it was useful because it gave him the chance to end their friendship in person. To millions watching, it sounded like he was rationalizing his closeness to a predator. The backlash was immediate. The interview was branded a disaster, a train wreck, a car crash. Even the Queen couldn't protect him this time. Within days, Andrew announced he was stepping back from royal duties. It was an exile. For the first time in modern history, a senior royal was effectively banished for scandal. The damage didn't stop there. Charities cut ties with him. Universities stripped his honorary positions. Military groups removed him from their ranks. Andrew had gone from being the Queen's favored son to a man toxic to every institution connected to the monarchy. Still, Rue pressed forward. In 2021, she filed a civil lawsuit in the United States accusing Andrew's sexual assault. Andrew's lawyers tried everything to get it dismissed, arguing she had no case, that he was protected by technicalities, and that the accusations were false. Nothing worked. A judge ruled the case could go to trial. For Andrew, that meant one thing. He would either face Jaffer in open court or settle privately. In early 2022, Andrew settled. He paid Jupri a reported £12 million. The palace insisted it wasn't an admission of guilt, but the public saw it differently. Too many? It looked like he had bought his way out of accountability. Worse still, questions swirled about where the money came from. Some suspected the Queen herself had quietly funded the deal to protect the monarchy. By the time of Prince Philip's funeral, the world saw Andrew alone, trailing behind his siblings. At the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, he was banned from appearing on the balcony. At her funeral, he was stripped of his military uniform, standing awkwardly as his siblings wore theirs. Each moment was the answer to the prayers of all those whom he harmed. That wasn't it. The moment Charles took power, Andrew was stripped of all remaining honorary military titles. He was told he would no longer represent the crown in any official capacity. The doors to royal life were slammed shut. Even his security detail was downgraded, forcing him to argue for protection like an ordinary citizen. To Andrew, it was a humiliation beyond words. To Charles, it was necessary surgery. Cutting away the infection to preserve the monarchy, the coronation of 2023 made the rupture visible. Cameras captured every second of Andrew's humiliation. He arrived not in uniform, not in ceremonial robes, but in the plain suit of a sidelined relative. His siblings walked with purpose, dressed in symbols of power. Andrew shuffled awkwardly, his face a mask of suppressed anger. Body language experts noted the gap between him and the rest of the family. The way Charles barely acknowledged him, the way William avoided eye contact, the way Harry, for all his own controversies, seemed more accepted than the disgraced Duke. It wasn't the only time he was isolated. At Easter service that same year, cameras again caught the fracture. Charles and William strode ahead, engaged with the crowd, while Andrew lagged behind, ignored even by his own nieces and nephews. Every gesture, every glance told the story. Andrew was now the royal family's ghost. But exile from public life didn't erase the private life that continued to leak now. More staff came forward with memories that made the public hate him even more. One claimed Andrew would leave piles of laundry scattered across his rooms, expecting maids to clean up without complaint. Another described how he insisted on baths prepared at precise temperatures, barking at staff if the water wasn't measured to his liking. A valet recalled being ordered to press Andrew's shoelaces flat with an iron. The details sounded absurd, but they revealed a man consumed by entitlement, detached from normal human behavior.